In this tutorial we're learning how to create simple animation in After Effects. If you've never used After Effects at all though, I recommend you watch my quick introduction to After Effects video. You can find a link in the description. In this session we're going to be creating an animation using After Effects. And we're going to be animating a simple illustration that I've made in Adobe Illustrator. It's a vector-based illustration, and the advantage of using vectors is they're not pixel-based. So you can deform them, stretch them, scale them without fear of the illustration becoming pixelated, which is a great advantage really. This isn't primarily an Illustrator tutorial though. We're going to be animating this to become familiar with the animation features in Adobe After Effects. So you can create your own illustration, or you can download my illustration and follow along with the tutorial. So what I've done in Illustrator is I've grouped my various elements into different layers. So we've got the dart layer, and we've got all the various shapes that the dart is made up of in a layer. We've got the target, the actual board, and a background. Very simple. Now we're going to try and import our illustration, our Illustrator file, into After Effects. So the best way to do this is actually to just drag our Illustrator file. This is where your media belongs, and all your various footage, your photos, whatever you're using. So we're just going to drag that in. Now a little dialog pops up. There's a lot of different ways that you can import Illustrator files, but this setting I find, footage on merged layers, is actually the best. It's a little bit counterintuitive to import it as footage rather than composition, but I'll show you why. So you click OK, and it brings in your Illustrator file here, and we can just drop this onto the timeline. Now you can see that it's created a timeline, 12 seconds, which is default. You can play through it by hitting the spacebar. Obviously nothing's happening right now, and it's just in a single layer, so we want to expand it out to our 4 layers that we created in Illustrator. So to do that, you need to right click on your file, and what you want to do is go to the Create tab, and then you want to go to Convert to Layered Comp. Now it's created what's called an After Effects composition. You can see it's created up there as well. When you see this icon, this is a folder that will contain footage into a composition. So if I go into this folder, and these are our Illustrator layers, we actually want to convert these into After Effects shapes. Shapes have a lot more flexibility and a lot more options when it comes to animating within After Effects. So what we're going to do is we're going to select all of these layers. Right click, we're going to go to Create once again, and we're going to go to Create Shapes from Vector Layers, and that's created all of these shapes. Now we want to delete our Illustrator layers because we don't need them anymore. Delete. Now if you can see these 2 tabs here, we're inside that composition folder, but if we go back to Dartboard, we're outside of the folder. We can go back in, and we'll just select our layers, we'll copy them. I'll just drag selecting them, and hitting Command C to copy. And I'm going to go back to Dartboard, and I'm just going to paste Command V, and I'm just going to delete the composition. So now we just have our different layers, and we're all set up to begin animation. So we've gone through this process of turning our Illustrator files into shapes, and I just wanted to show you what shapes are within After Effects. So shapes basically work through this system of points. These points are connected, and they work basically like dot to dots, and you can get control over these points. You can move them about. And you can animate their position. You can change the colour of your shape. You can scale the shape. You can scale it infinitely, unlike, say, if you brought it in from Photoshop, where it will become pixelated. You can edit the position of the whole shape, and you can go in and edit the individual points of the shape if you've got to double click on the shape. And it just gives you a lot more flexibility than if you were working with pixel based artwork, and it allows a lot of animation opportunities. So the way you animate in After Effects, let's select our dart and we'll just click on this little arrow. We get more options of all the things that we can do. So on this layer we have the contents. Now, just like in Illustrator, this contains the contents of our layers. We can toggle them off if we want. So these are all our various different parts of the dart. Then we can also go to transform, and this is how we transform this layer. So we can change its position up and down. We can change the scale. We can change the rotation. We can change the opacity of the layer, or how transparent it is. And we can change what's called the anchor point. Now, what is an anchor point? An anchor point is the central point where all your transformations will center from. If I rotate, it's rotating around the anchor point. If I position, it's using that position as the main point that it's moving from. If I change the scale, it will be scaling from that central point. Now really we actually want the anchor point to be at the point, so that when it flies through the air, the weight is behind this point. Now if that doesn't make much sense right now, don't worry, you'll see as we go on. And now you can see that is now the central point from where our transformations are coming from. Now next to all of these is a little stopwatch, and whenever you see a stopwatch in After Effects, that is an animation setting. So if I hit the stopwatch, you can see on the timeline a little point or a keyframe has been created. That is recorded with the stopwatch, this position, as a keyframe. So if I now move to the end and I move it once again, it's created another keyframe, and now it's animated in between those two keyframes. I can do the same with the scale. Let's turn it on for scale, and let's scale it all the way down. And if I move back to the second keyframe, scale it all the way up, created that second keyframe there, now it will animate. And you can do the same for rotation, you can do the same for opacity. Very simple. I'll turn them off for now. Inside of contents, we can go to groups as well, and inside we have all of these different settings. So we have the path, which can also, as you see, be animated. The path is the actual shape. There's these actual shapes. We also have the fill. This contains the actual colour. We can actually edit the colour as well inside of After Effects. We can change the opacity, and there's various other settings here. We can transform as well, just like we can within the main layer settings. So let's get rid of contents for now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start to animate now our dart. It's going to fly through the area in an arc like this, and it's going to hit the dartboard about there. So let's start now. Let's have the dart completely out of frame at this point. We're going to hit the little stopwatch, and we're going to drag the dart all the way out of frame. And then it's going to travel, it's going to take about 2 seconds to reach the dartboard. We're then going to drag it all the way over to the dartboard. And let's have it hit the dartboard around there. Move it down. Something like that. Right, now let's watch what we've got. As it loads the media, it's always a little bit slow. But now if we play that again, the area that's green, we're going to moving at proper speed. That's fine, I think it can move a little bit faster. There we go. Right, so there's obviously a lot of different problems. We actually wanted to travel not straight to the dartboard, we wanted to travel in a bit of an arc. So let's fix that first. So we'll just grab the dartboard, we're in between our 2 points, and we're just going to lift up the dart, and that's created a third keyframe, as you can see. We'll just move that more into the middle. You can see these handles have created this curve. We're just going to make sure that we're on that keyframe. We're going to very carefully just round this off a little bit. That looks good. Let's play that back and have a look and see what we've got. So the main problem is now the dart doesn't really properly follow the path in terms of its rotation. So let's go to this keyframe and we'll just turn the little rotation stopwatch on, and we'll just roll it down so that it follows the path. And just move that up again. We'll just move that up again. And we'll play it back. There we go. So just a heads up about rotation. You need to bear in mind that it's recording how many times I rotate it. So say it was like this, that's how it was before. Yeah. Say I aligned it with that path but I went round the other way. So I go all the way round the other way. That has obviously created a huge issue. It knows what way round you did it. We don't want that. Doing that is not the same. You know, if we went round again, and then go, if we were to go round again, we're just going to end up with a dart that's flying through the air like that, which is not what we want. What we want to do is we want to, I've just deleted that keyframe, we just want to lift it up that way. And that's perfect. So change that there. Play it back. There we go. Now when it hits the dartboard, I think it'd be a bit sort of, the weight of the dart then brought it down a little bit. You see what I mean? Like this sort of. doesn't need to go down as far as that. We'll just create another keyframe by hitting this button here. We'll just get rid of that. Perfect. Now, what we want to do next is we want it to look like the dart actually sticks into the dartboard. And for that, we're going to use a mask. So we're going to mask out this area, the actual point of the dart, so that it looks like that it's stuck into the dartboard itself. So the way to create a mask is you go to the pen tool. You click on the pen tool. Now the pen tool actually can create shapes here, like this. I'll just go back. I'll just hit Control Z. Get rid of it. Or it can create masks. So make sure you've got mask selected. So by default the mask is set to add, which is the opposite of what we want. We now just have the point of the dart. So we want to go to masks in our dart layer and change it from add to subtract. And now it's doing what we want. The problem is the mask now follows the dart. We want the mask to stay here on the dartboard. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the exact moment it hits the board, which is there. And we're going to click on our mask, click on the little animate stopwatch. I'm going to create a keyframe there. We're going to go back one frame. We're going to select our mask and we're just going to drag it off. Now it only will affect the dart as it enters the mask, like that. So let's just watch that back. That all looks good to me. That's great. We're going to actually have it just stick in a little bit more. So we're going to go select our mask. Go to our keyframe. And we're going to go to our selection tool. And we're going to just edit the mask so that it goes in just that bit further. There we go. I'll play back now. So the other thing I will show you about animating is there's something called the graph editor. And this initially looks quite scary. But don't let it scare you. We're on position now. So this is a graph and it shows how our dart is animating between those keyframes. So you can see that it's actually travelling faster here, and it's actually, because you can see the steepness of it changes, you can see that it's actually slowing down as it hits the board, and if you look carefully you can see that that's what's happening. So it's travelling a little bit faster and it slows down. That's actually not what we want at all. So we're actually going to select that keyframe, that middle keyframe. We'll just make sure that it's completely straight. Yeah, that looks good. It could probably, the whole thing probably could be a little bit faster. I'm going to grab those keyframes and we'll just put it slightly towards. And we'll just do the same with that. Now we'll click out of our graph editor. And we'll just watch that back. Click the spacebar, place through. That's looking good. I think it'd be nice if it slowly, I like the way it sinks down, but I think we could carry that on a bit longer but make it slower. So we'll make a new keyframe here and we'll just very subtly pull it down a little bit more. Now you can see that this transformation just remains at a constant speed until it reaches there and then it just stops. What we'd like to happen is we'd like it to, and then just slow down and then come to a stop. We can do that if we go back to our graph editor. So we'll go back to our graph editor. You can see there that it's just, the speed remains entirely constant. If we go to this keyframe and then we click for it, if we then click on easy ease in, now we can see that it slows down. And that's actually a very useful setting for animation. Now you can see that it hits the board and it slows down. Maybe do it a little bit more, in fact. There we go, that's perfect. One more time. Now in animation it's sort of nice if, as it's travelling fast, it sort of stretches and then it compresses it as it hits the board. It's not realistic, but it just creates this impression of movement. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to go to our scale. I'm going to click on scale. We're going to select the dartboard here and we want it to be completely uncompressed when it hits the board. So we're just going to make a keyframe there. By clicking this button here, create a keyframe. You can see this is our set of scale keyframes. And when it's travelling through the air, as you can see, if I scale it, I'm not stretching it. The whole thing is scaling perfectly. So what we need to do is actually we need to uncheck this link button here. And now we can deform it nicely. So let's stretch it and we'll squash it as well. And we'll start off ludicrously stretching it initially. That looks good, actually, even though it's kind of silly. We'll go to scale. We'll move it down here, and we'll move this there. That is when it hits the board. You can see there, because that's when we turn the mask on. So we'll change that scale. So that scale changes only when it comes to a stop. And it'd be sort of nice when it hit the board if it stretched the other way. So we'll create a new keyframe, which is undeformed, and in between that we'll create a new deformation. We'll stretch it this way this time. You can see because we've got our anchor point here, you can see that it's doing the deformations from the anchor point, which is quite nice. So now let's play it back. That's quite fun. We sort of want to get back into its normal position a bit more slowly though. And once again we sort of want it to slow down. We'll go into our graph editor and you can see it's a straight line. The speed of the animation remains constant the whole way through. And we're going to hit the easy ease in. And that's going to create a point like that. You can just take our the handles here. You can just drag out. That looks quite good. It'll be sort of nice if the dartboard itself actually reacted to the dart hitting it. So it sort of moved, jogged around because of the impact of the dart. So what we'll do is we'll select the board. No, we'll select the face of the dartboard, which is the markings. So they will move separate to the board. Obviously, in terms of physics, that doesn't really make sense, but for a sort of cartoonish animation, I think it will work quite well in a sort of stylized sort of way. So we'll set a keyframe the moment the dart impacts the board, and then we'll set a keyframe a bit further on without actually changing any of the settings, and then we'll set another keyframe. We'll move the position, which automatically creates a third keyframe in the middle. So it will go from the first keyframe to a different position and then back to its original position. So it creates just a nice little impact. It just moves ever so slightly and falls back to its original position. Now we're going to do the same with the board. So we're going to go into transform on the board layer, set a keyframe, set another keyframe, and we'll set a third keyframe. So once again it moves to the new keyframe and then back to its original position. It would be sort of nice if some of the individual components of the target, some of these markings or numbers, moved perhaps a little as the dart hit individually. So in order to edit the individual components of a layer, we're going to go into the layer, we're going to go to contents. Now all these groups are different components. So group 4, for example, that's numbers. I'm going to scroll down, we're going to find this component nearest to the dart when it hits, and that is group 75. That is it. So we'll go in there. If we scroll down, we can go to transform group 75. So we're now just editing that individual component, and we can set a keyframe on the position. We'll set another keyframe exactly when the dart hits the board. So that's when we want our movements to happen. And then we'll set another keyframe. We'll move it ever so slightly. Let's move it quite a lot. Let's try moving it. Let's move it about there. Obviously this doesn't make sense in terms of physics, but somehow in a cartoonish sort of animation it just adds that impact. So we'll just move it again. There we go. That's about right. So I've gone through that same process. I've added a few more animations to some of the other parts of the target. There's a few more finishing touches I want to do to add to this before it's finished. One of the things I want to do is I want to add a shadow where the dart hits the board. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to use a shape. So we're going to go to the shape tool up here. If we hold that down with the left click, we get a bunch of other options, and we're going to click on the ellipse tool. I'm going to create a circular shape just by holding and dragging the left mouse. I'm going to put that layer underneath the dart layer. We're going to change the colour up here. We're going to click on fill. We're going to select a nice dark blue colour here. Okay, that's obviously much too dark. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to change the opacity. So if we set the layer and you set the little down arrow, you can then change the opacity. So it's a bit more transparent. We're going to make it a little bit smaller. We have to move it over. Okay, that's looking good. Now we're going to drag our whole layer because we want the layer to start. We don't want a shadow here. We want the shadow to start when the dart hits the board. So we're going to have it start here. And we'll select a keyframe here so that it's at full transparency the transparency we want it there, then we're going to make it fade in. So at this point we're going to pull the transparency right down. Not quite all the way down, but almost all the way down. There. And we're going to keyframe movement as well, so we're going to click on position. So it looks about right there, so we're going to put a keyframe there. And then put another keyframe here. And another down here. I think we could actually make our shadow a little bit smaller. Make it a bit smaller. We're going to now have to go back. So these arrows here, we can go back to the previous keyframe. And we'll just fix those keyframes. Back again. There. That looks good. So, that will about do it. I think we'll leave it there, just because I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information. Well done if you've made it this far. Again, it probably seems quite overwhelming at the moment, but just try to follow along. You can download the illustration and just follow along with my tutorial as best you can. If you have any questions, you can email me or your tutors. We shall leave it there.